The phone rang at 5:43 a.m. I answered without speaking, just listening. "Mr. Martinez, we have information that you will be visited by immigration and customs enforcement agents today. A close family member reported you." I hung up without responding. I felt the wrinkles on my face deepen as a solitary tear traced a path down my cheek. 68 years building a life, and my own son was trying to tear it down. I rose slowly, slipped on my worn slippers, and walked toward the safe hidden behind a frame print of the Declaration of Independence. There it was, my green card, shining and legitimate for 15 years. My name is Joaquin Jack Martinez. I arrived in the United States in 1987 with nothing but an old backpack and $30 in my pocket. I crossed like so many others, my heart pounding with fear and my feet raw from the desert crossing. But that's a story for another day. The important thing is that, unlike many, I did manage to regularize my status. I worked 20 years cleaning office buildings in Chicago, saving every single cent. I bought investment properties in Tampa, Florida, and outside of Dallas, Texas. I invested in small businesses that grew. And when I finally obtained my permanent residency, I felt like I could breathe for the first time in decades. I never told anyone about my green card, not even my wife, Evelyn, who passed away 7 years ago without knowing. It was my insurance, my card up my sleeve in a country where being an immigrant means always having to be ready for the worst. As I poured a cup of thick black coffee, I remembered when Richard, my older son, was 10. I took him fishing on Lake Michigan. His eyes lit up when he caught his first sunfish. "Look, Dad, I did it myself." He hugged me tight that day. Now he's 42. He has a real estate business and a custom home in Naperville that I paid for 60% of. And he just tried to get me deported. The conflict started 3 months ago when I announced I was selling 2 key properties in Miami. They were properties I bought for almost nothing in the 90s, and now they were worth a fortune. Richard and my other son, Gabriel, assumed those properties would be their inheritance. I never promised such a thing. What I did tell them, ever since they were boys, is that they would have to earn their own way. I paid for their private universities. I gave them capital for their first businesses. But I never wanted to raise spoiled kids. Maybe I failed. Maybe I spoiled them anyway. "You're going to sell the land for what, Dad? To go on a cruise with Aunt Lucy?" Richard said to me at last month's family dinner, using that mocking tone he uses when he wants to humiliate me in front of his kids. "At your age, you should be thinking about getting your affairs in order for us, not spending what belongs to us." But I didn't respond that day. I simply cut my steak and chewed slowly. My daughter-in-law, Stephanie, a white American from Connecticut who barely spoke any Spanish, looked at me with pity. My grandchildren kept their eyes on their phones, oblivious to everything. Gabriel pretended not to hear while he explained something to his wife. The silence was heavy as lead. What Richard doesn't know is that I'm selling those properties to start a foundation. I want to create scholarships for young people from my original community back in Mexico who want to study medicine or engineering. I want to build a community learning center named after Evelyn. I want to give back some of the much that life has given me, but he can only see green bills disappearing from his hands. The doorbell rang at 8:15. 2 ICE agents were on my porch, a tall white man and a Latina woman who avoided looking me in the eyes. "Mr. Joaquin Martinez?" the man asked. "Yes, that's me," I replied calmly, my voice firm despite the knot in my throat. "We have information that you may be in the country unlawfully. Do you have documentation to prove your immigration status?" I remembered when Richard graduated from college. I was in the back row, in my new suit and shiny shoes. I clapped until my hands hurt when he received his diploma. Later at the dinner, he sat with his friends and barely introduced me. "This is my dad," he just said, without mentioning the 3 jobs I worked to pay for that business degree. Of course, officer. Allow me a moment. I went for my green card and handed it to the agent. He examined it carefully, passing it through a handheld machine he carried. The Latina woman finally looked at me, with a mixture of surprise and something akin to respect. Everything seems to be in order, Mr. Martinez. We apologize for the inconvenience. No problem, I replied. I would just like to know who made the report. The man was silent, but the woman spoke in a low voice. You know we can't officially reveal that information, sir. I understand, but, she continued, looking out towards the street, if I were you, I'd talk to my family. False reports are a federal offense. As I watched them drive away in their black SUV, I felt a mix of sadness and rage burning inside me. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the ingratitude, the contempt, the ease with which my own son had decided to destroy my life for money. I returned to the kitchen and finished my coffee, now cold. I looked at the calendar on the wall, May 16th, Gabriel's birthday. There would be a dinner tonight at his house. Richard would be there, unaware that his plan had failed. Unaware that his father, that old man he saw as an obstacle, had more resources and more dignity than he would ever understand. The phone rang again. It was Lucy, my sister-in-law, the only family I have left from my generation. Are you okay, Jack? I was worried about what you told me yesterday. I'm fine, Lucy. The immigration officers already came. My God, what happened? Nothing. I showed them my green card and they left. The silence on the other side of the line lasted several seconds. You had a green card? Since when? Why did you never say anything? For 15 years, Lucy. And I didn't say anything because in this country, being an immigrant means never showing all your cards. After hanging up, I sat down in the old armchair in the living room, the one Evelyn insisted on keeping because it held memories of us. I closed my eyes and let the memories flow. The day Richard was born, so small and wrinkled, his first steps holding onto my fingers, the afternoons teaching him to ride his bike in the park, the goodnight hugs when I read him stories. At what point did that child who adored me turn into a man capable of trying to deport his own father? The clock marked 11:30 a.m. when I made a decision. I opened my computer and sent an email to my lawyer, Frank Sullivan. I asked him to prepare all the documents to sell the properties immediately and establish the foundation. I also asked him for something else, to modify my will. Richard would no longer receive anything. Gabriel's house is large and ostentatious, with that modern glass and concrete style that young people like so much now. When I arrived at 7 p.m., everyone was already there. Gabriel and his wife, Elena, Richard and Stephanie, my 5 teenage grandchildren, and some family friends. They greeted me with distant hugs and polite smiles. No one noticed the manila envelope I carried in my jacket. During dinner, I watched Richard. He was restless, constantly checking his phone. He was surely expecting a call confirming that his father was already in an immigration detention center. Or maybe he was waiting for news from some contact at ICE. In any case, his nervousness was evident to me, though invisible to others. So how is the sale of the properties going, Dad? Gabriel asked as they served dessert. Richard mentioned you were considering offers. Before I could answer, Richard intervened. In fact, I think Dad should reconsider that sale. It's not a good time for the real estate market in Florida. I looked at him squarely. His eyes avoided mine. There are no properties left to sell, I said calmly. I already sold them all. Silence fell upon the table like a slab. Richard paled visibly. What? When? To whom? He stammered. I signed the papers this morning. Frank had everything ready weeks ago. As for who, that doesn't matter. What matters is that the money will go to a foundation for students back in Mexico. A foundation? Richard's voice was strangled. You're going to give away millions of dollars to strangers? Is this a joke? No, son, it's not a joke. It's my decision. My age is my will. Gabriel tried to mediate, as always. Dad, I think we should talk about this in private. It's your birthday dinner. It's not the time for... On the contrary, I interrupted him. It's the perfect time, because today I also want to announce something else. I took out the manila envelope and placed it on the table. Richard looked at it as if it were a venomous snake. I had an interesting visit today. 2 immigration agents came to my house this morning. Richard's face was a study in panic. Stephanie, his wife, looked confused. Someone told them I was undocumented, I continued. Someone wanted me deported. That's terrible, Dad, Gabriel said, genuinely surprised. Who would do something like that? Ask your brother. All eyes turned to Richard, who started coughing nervously. I don't know what you're talking about, Dad. You're confused. Maybe it was some resentful neighbor. Or maybe it was the son who wanted to make sure his father didn't sell the properties he already considered his own. I interrupted him. The same son who 3 weeks ago told his friend, Jason Williams, an ICE officer, that his Mexican father had been living illegally in this country for decades. Is that true, Richard? Gabriel's voice trembled with surprise and anger. Richard suddenly stood up, knocking over his wine glass. You don't have proof of anything. Besides, if you were really illegal, wouldn't it be my duty as an American citizen to report it? This country has laws. Sit down, Richard, I said with a tranquility I didn't feel. I have something to show you. I opened the envelope and pulled out 3 documents. The first was a copy of my green card. The second, a recording of the call Richard made to his ICE friend, obtained by methods Frank assured me were legal, though costly. And the third, the most important, my new last will and testament. This, I said, showing the green card, is what prevented you from getting rid of me this morning. I've had it for 15 years. I never told you because I always knew that money mattered more to you than your father. Richard's eyes filled with tears of rage, of regret. That hurt me more than his betrayal. And this, I continued, showing the recording, is the proof of what you did. A false immigration report is a federal offense, son. You could face serious charges. You wouldn't dare, he murmured. You're right, I won't, because despite everything, you're still my son. But this last thing, I said, showing the will, I have bequeathed it to you. You will not receive another penny from me. The house you live in, which is still in my name, you must buy or vacate in 90 days. Chaos erupted at the table. Stephanie began to cry. The grandchildren retreated awkwardly. Gabriel tried to calm tempers while his wife ushered the guests into another room. Richard, red with fury, yelled that I couldn't do this to him, that it was unfair, that he had rights. Rights? I asked with a calm that came from the deepest part of my being. What rights does a son have who tries to deport his father? What rights does a man have who betrays the blood that gave him life? I slowly stood up, as an old man who has lived long enough not to be in a hurry does. I looked around, at this broken family, at these children I raised in my first 30 years in this country. In my hometown, there is a saying, I said, heading toward the door. Respect is inherited, but it can also be lost. And when it's lost, son, it's like trust. It never fully comes back. I walked out into the cool Chicago night, a city that was never truly home, but that gave me refuge for decades. I walked slowly toward my car, finding my way in that cold, distant light that seems to come from another world. Behind me, I heard hurried footsteps. It was Gabriel. Dad, wait, he said, almost breathless. You can't leave like this. I've already made my decision, son. It's not about that. What Richard did is unforgivable, but I don't want you to leave thinking we're all the same. Unlike Richard, Gabriel was always more sensitive, more like Evelyn in spirit. I know, son. That's why you're still in my will, but I need time. I need to think about what I did wrong for my own son to see me as an obstacle to be eliminated. Gabriel hugged me then, a strong, sincere hug, the kind he hadn't given me since he was a child. I felt his tears wet my shoulder. "I love you, Dad," he murmured, his voice cracking. "And I love you, my son." As I drove back home, I thought about all the sacrifices I made for my children. The years working 18-hour days, the birthdays I missed because I was working 2 or 3 jobs, my hands cracked by chlorine and cleaning products. All so they would never lack anything, so they would have the opportunities I never had. But maybe I was wrong. Perhaps giving them everything material without demanding anything spiritual was a mistake. Perhaps I should have taught them more about the value of hard work, about dignity, about respect. Or maybe that's just life. We raise children for a world we don't understand, and they grow up to become people we don't recognize. When I got home, the first thing I did was call Frank. I asked him to stop everything. We wouldn't file charges against Richard. He wouldn't be evicted from his house. I wouldn't cut him completely out of the will. His betrayal hurt me like a dagger in the chest, but he was still my son, and I was still his father, for better or for worse. Then I called Lucy. I told her everything that happened at dinner. She cried with me, cursed Richard in 3 different languages, and finally asked, "And what are you going to do now, Jack?" I looked out the window where I had received the news that morning. I saw a young Latino couple walking hand in hand, probably newcomers, with that mixture of hope and fear I myself felt so long ago. "I'm going to proceed with the foundation plan," I replied. "I'm going to help those kids from my hometown have a better future. And then I'm going back to Mexico for a while. I need to go back to the land after the rain. I want to remember who I am before it's too late." "And Richard?" I sighed deeply. The image of my elder son trying to deport me still burned in my mind like acid. Time will tell, Lucy. Time and his own actions. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat on the back porch, looking at the stars and thinking about Evelyn. She always said, "It's not about being right, but choosing peace over being right." I wasn't sure I could forgive Richard, at least not yet. But I did know one thing. At 68, I had learned that respect is not demanded. It's earned. And sometimes the people we love the most are the ones who can hurt us the deepest. The phone rang one more time in the early morning. "Dad, I was drunk. What I did, I didn't think that." "You did think, son," I interrupted him. "You thought very well about what you were doing, and that's what hurts me the most. I can explain. It's just the properties. We were counting on that inheritance so we wouldn't have to struggle like you did." "To have the easy life I never had," I completed his sentence. "You will always be my son. But what you did, that will take time. A lot of time." "Will you ever forgive me?" he asked in a thin voice. The answer didn't come from my mind, but from somewhere deeper. Perhaps from the same place where I keep the memories of my own childhood in Mexico, of my father working under the sun, of my mother kneading tortillas before dawn. "If you prove you've changed, you'll have to earn my respect back, and it won't be easy." I hung up and kept looking at the phone in my hand. So many lives, so many stories, so many sacrifices contained in this dysfunctional family. So many dreams fulfilled and so many others broken along the way. In the end, I thought, that's what it means to be an immigrant. Crossing not only physical, but emotional borders, building bridges between worlds, and accepting that sometimes what we leave behind is not just a country, but a version of ourselves that no longer exists except in memory. Dawn found me still awake, with a decision made and a strange peace in my heart. I would sell everything, start the foundation, return to Mexico for a while, and then perhaps come back to try to rebuild the broken bridges with my family. But like the stars that were now fading in the Chicago sky, that was beyond my reach, but not beyond my hope. After all, I thought, as the first ray of sun illuminated my tired face, If being an immigrant taught me anything, it was to start over, again and again, regardless of age, regardless of the scars. There is always a new dawn waiting. There is always a new path to walk. But dignity is never something they give you. It's something you earn, step by step, day by day, with every decision you make and every test you face. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I prayed, not to a specific God, but to that mysterious force that keeps us standing when everything seems to collapse. I prayed for wisdom, for the love that runs in my blood but that I no longer recognize as part of my soul. Respect is gained and lost, and when it's lost, recovering it is the work of a lifetime. But I had crossed deserts before. I had rebuilt my life from scratch. I had faced contempt and adversity. This time would be no different. My son reported me to immigration because he thought it was the end of my life. After all I've lived, I have no more weak points, only scars that remind me how strong I can be. 3 weeks after that disastrous scene, I was sitting in the office of Frank Sullivan, my lawyer and friend of more than 2 decades. On his desk, a blue folder contained all the documents for the creation of my foundation. "It's a great project, Jack," Frank said as he put the documents away. "It will be operational in a month. Are you still sure you want to name Gabriel as part of the board of directors?" I nodded slowly. "It's my way of showing him I trust him. Besides, I need someone in the family to continue this when I'm gone." "And Richard?" "Richard needs time to reflect, and I need time to forgive." I left the office and walked a few blocks to a small Mexican cafe in Pilsen. I needed the flavor of a good café de olla, something to remind me of my roots. While waiting for my order, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Richard. Not out of spite, but out of necessity. Some bonds, when broken, need time to heal, and some betrayals are too deep to be forgiven with a simple apology. The coffee arrived, steaming and aromatic. As I drank it, I remembered the first time I brought Evelyn to the States. When she was finally able to visit me with a tourist visa, I brought her to this same neighborhood. "This isn't Mexico," she said, "but it smells like home." My phone vibrated again. This time it was Gabriel. "Dad, can we meet today? It's about Richard." "What's going on with him?" I asked, feeling immediate worry. Despite everything, the paternal instinct never dies. "I'd better tell you in person. Starbucks, 5? "I'll be there." I hung up and remained thoughtful. What had Richard done now? The last time I spoke to Gabriel, he told me Richard was drinking more than usual, and that things with Stephanie weren't going well. I finished my coffee and decided to walk to the lake. I needed the fresh air, the vastness of the water to put my thoughts in order. As I walked along the shore, I watched families looking after their children, elderly couples walking hand in hand, teenagers on skateboards. I sat on a bench and pulled out an old, wrinkled photo from my pocket. Evelyn, Richard, and Gabriel, Christmas 1995. Richard was 12 then, and his smile lit up the room. Gabriel, smaller and shyer, clung to his mother's arm. And Evelyn, her quiet beauty, her eyes full of hope. "My 3 treasures," she used to say when she saw this photo. At what point did we lose our way? When did love turn into ambition and respect into resentment? Maybe it was gradual, so slow that we didn't notice it until it was too late. Like those cracks that appear in the walls of old houses. First almost invisible, then impossible to ignore. At 5 o'clock, I walked into the coffee shop where I was meeting Gabriel. He was already there, with an expression that reminded me of when he was a boy and came to confess some mischief. I sat across from him and ordered an Americano. "What's going on with Richard, son? You have me worried." Gabriel sighed deeply. "Stephanie left him, Dad. She took the kids to Connecticut with her parents." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "Why?" "She says she doesn't recognize the man he's become. He's unrecognizable. He drinks too much. He's become verbally aggressive." "Did he hurt her?" I asked, fearing the answer. "No, not physically, but he yelled at her in front of the kids. He said horrible things. He blamed her for supporting you instead of him." I closed my eyes for a moment. Richard always had that explosive temper, that inability to accept his mistakes. He was so much like my younger self that it sometimes scared me. "And now, where is he?" "That's the other problem," Gabriel said, lowering his voice. "He lost his job. The real estate firm let him go because he showed up drunk to a meeting with important clients." "My God," I murmured. "When did all this happen?" "The separation, a week ago. The job, just yesterday." I remained silent, processing the information, and a part of me felt it was my fault, not for disinheriting him, but for not teaching him to face the consequences of his actions with dignity. "What do you want me to do, Gabriel? I've tried to talk to him several times. He doesn't listen." Gabriel looked me straight in the eyes. "He's coming here, Dad. I told him you'd be here. He needs your help, even if he's too proud to ask for it." Before I could answer, Richard walked in. I'd never seen him like this. Disheveled, with days of beard, bloodshot eyes. He paused for a moment when he saw me, as if doubting, and then he advanced toward our table. He sat down without greeting us. The three of us remained in silence until the waitress came to take his order. "A black coffee," he said in a hoarse voice, "and a shot of tequila if you have it." "Just coffee," Gabriel corrected. I looked at this stranger he had become. I remembered when he was born. So small he fit in my two hands. How I promised to always protect him, to give him a better life than mine. "Richard," I finally said, "your brother told me what's going on." He let out a bitter laugh. "What exactly did he tell you? That my life is falling apart? That my wife left me? That I no longer have a job? That I'm about to lose the house because I can't pay the mortgage?" "I didn't know that," Gabriel said, surprised. "Well, yes," Richard continued. "The bank called yesterday. I'm 2 months late. If I don't catch up, they'll start the foreclosure process." His coffee arrived. He drank it in one gulp, as if it were a shot, not caring that it was scalding hot. "And what do you want from me, Richard?" I asked calmly. His eyes filled with tears of rage. "Is that what you think? That I came for your damn money? After everything that happened?" "Then what, son? Because honestly, I don't know." Richard broke then. I saw all his facade of hardness crumble. We started to cry, a heavy, wrenching sob I hadn't heard since he was a child. Gabriel put a hand on his shoulder, awkward but supportive. "I ruined everything, Dad," he said between sobs. "Everything. My marriage, my career, my relationship with you. And the worst part is that I know it was my fault, my damned ambition, my stupidity." I observed him in silence. Part of me wanted to hug him, comfort him like when he was little and scraped his knees. Another part reminded me of his betrayal, how easy it had been for him to try to destroy my life. "Why did you do it, Richard? Why did you report me to immigration? I need to understand." He wiped his tears with the sleeve of his wrinkled shirt. "Because I'm an idiot, Dad. Because when you said you were selling the properties, I panicked. I have debts, a lot of debts. I gamble, Dad. I bet online. I've been hiding it from Stephanie for years. I thought with my part of the inheritance I could fix everything. And for that, you tried to deport me? To collect your inheritance faster?" "I didn't think they would actually deport you," he said, though we both knew that was a lie. "I thought you would just get scared and change your mind about selling the properties." I took a deep breath, trying to control the mixture of emotions I felt: disappointment, sadness, but also a strange compassion. My son was broken, as I had been so many times in my life. "What do you want me to do, Richard? Tell me exactly what you expect from me right now." He looked at me with pleading eyes. "I want another chance, Dad. I'm not asking for money. I'm asking for time. Time to prove to you that I can change, that I can be the son you deserve." I remained silent for a moment, thinking. The decisions we make in a moments like this define who we truly are. And I had always defined myself not by my successes, but by my capacity to forgive, to build bridges where others built walls. "I'm going back to Mexico for a while," I finally said. "A month, maybe 2. The foundation is almost ready, and I want to supervise the start of the projects there. When I return, we'll talk. In the meantime, you can stay in my house. It will give you time to put your life in order." The surprise on his face was evident. He hadn't expected this. "Are you serious?" "Yes, but with conditions. You will seek professional help for your gambling problem. You will try to fix things with Stephanie, at least for your children. And you will ask your brother for temporary work until you find something on your own." Gabriel nodded, indicating he was willing to hire him temporarily. Richard seemed not to know what to say. Finally, he extended his hand toward me. "Thank you, Dad. I swear I won't let you down this time." I didn't take his hand. Instead, I got up and walked around the table to hug him. Because in the end, beyond the lost respect and the wounds caused, he was still my son. And I was still his father, the man who crossed borders and survived the desert to give him a better life. As I hugged him, I felt something release inside me. It wasn't complete forgiveness, not yet. It was the beginning of something new, one more opportunity, like the second chances life had given me so many times. "The respect," I whispered in his ear. "You'll have to earn it again, day by day, decision by decision. It won't be easy, but it's possible." When we separated, I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time: humility. And perhaps, just perhaps, the beginning of the wisdom that comes after hitting rock bottom. Leaving the cafe, I looked up at the Chicago sky. The first stars were appearing in the firmament. I thought of Evelyn, of what she would have done in my place. "True love," she used to say, "is not loving someone because they are perfect, but despite the fact that they are not." That night, while packing for my trip to Mexico, I found an old card Richard had made for me on Father's Day when he was 7. In his childish handwriting, he had written, "Dad, when I grow up, I want to be just like you." I put it in my wallet, a reminder of what we were and of what perhaps, with time and will, we could be again. The landing in Guadalajara was gentle as a caress. When the plane's wheels touched the runway, I felt a familiar tingling in my chest. I was home, not the home I built in Chicago over decades, but the real one, the one I carried in my blood and memories. My nephew, Hector, was waiting for me at the airport, with that excessive enthusiasm he always had. He hugged me like he wanted to break my ribs. "Tio Joaquin, so good to see you. You look thinner, huh? Didn't they feed you up there in the States?" I smiled as we loaded my suitcases into his beat-up pickup truck. Hector, my sister Rosario's son, was the closest thing I had to a son in Mexico. He grew up admiring me, listening to the stories of my adventures up north as if they were legends. "And how is the family?" I asked as we left the airport for the chaotic traffic of Guadalajara. "The kids. Gloria." Hector sighed with that mix of pride and weariness that all parents of young children have. "Growing like weeds, Tio. Martin is turning 15, and Sophia 13. Gloria is still working at the school. She's the assistant principal now." The drive from Guadalajara to San Miguel, my hometown, took almost 3 hours. As we drove away from the city, the landscape transformed. The buildings and concrete gave way to fields of blue agave, hills rounded by time, and that impossibly wide sky that only exists in the Mexican countryside. Hector updated me on everything: the town gossip, who had gotten married, who had died, how much prices had gone up since my last visit. I listened half-heartedly, my mind split between his words and the scenery passing by the window, which became increasingly familiar. And how are your sons, Tio? Richard and Gabriel, right? The question pulled me out of my reverie. I hadn't told anyone in the family in Mexico about what happened with Richard. They're fine, I lied. Gabriel will be down in a few weeks with his wife and children. He wants to see the town, see where the foundation will be. And the older one, Richard? I pretended to look at something interesting outside the window. He has a lot of work. Maybe he'll come later. Hector nodded without insisting. In Mexico, we understand silence as an answer. San Miguel finally appeared before us, a cluster of low, colorful houses surrounding a central plaza with its pink quarry stone church. My heart skipped a beat at the sight of the bell tower, the same one I looked at every morning from my bedroom window when I was a child. Hector drove me to the old family home, now renovated thanks to the money I sent over the years. Rosario, my older sister, was waiting at the door. At 74, she was still firm as an oak, although her completely white hair and deep wrinkles told the story of a life that wasn't always easy. "Finally, you condescend to visit, ingrate," she said with feigned reproach as she hugged me. "I was starting to think you'd become a real gringo." That night, sitting in the backyard under a starry sky, Rosario served tequila in small crystal shot glasses. We toasted to the reunion, to those who were gone, and to the foundation that was about to begin. "Tell me the truth, Jack," she said after the third tequila. "What happened with Richard? I know you, Joaquin. Something's wrong." That was Rosario, direct, no beating around the bush, just like our mother. I told her everything, the immigration report, the betrayal, the consequences. As I spoke, I felt like I was releasing a weight I had carried with me across the ocean. Rosario listened in silence, nodding occasionally, her eyes glistening in the moonlight. "Sons," she said when I finished. "Sometimes they are a mirror we don't want to look into. They show us parts of ourselves we prefer to forget." "What do you mean?" Rosario refilled our glasses. "Don't you remember what you were like at his age? Ambitious, stubborn, capable of anything to get ahead." "I never would have betrayed Dad," I protested. "No, but you left when we needed you most. When Mom got sick." Her words hit me like a slap. It was true. I had left for the United States 2 months before Mom was diagnosed with cancer, and although I sent money for her treatments, I didn't return until her funeral 5 years later. "It was different," I murmured. "It's always different when it's about ourselves," she replied with a sad smile. "Look, Joaquin, I'm not saying what Richard did was right. It was a horrible betrayal. But perhaps, just perhaps, there is something of you in him, that determination that crosses lines when necessary." I remained thoughtful. It was possible that Richard had inherited not only my physical traits, but also my deepest flaws. That ability to justify questionable actions in the name of progress, of the future, of family. "What should I do, Rosario?" I asked, suddenly feeling like we were children again, and she, 4 years older, had all the answers. "What you're already doing, giving him a chance. But not for him, but for you. Resentment is a poison that only kills the one who drinks it." That night I slept in my old room, under the same roof that saw me grow up. Through the open window came the scent of jasmine that Mom planted 50 years ago and that, miraculously, was still alive. Before falling asleep, I checked my phone. There was a message from Richard. "Dad, I started therapy today. It's hard to talk about these issues, but I know it's necessary. The house is fine. Don't worry. We miss you. Take care." It was a small step, but a step nonetheless. The following days were spent touring the town, reconnecting with old friends, and visiting the grounds where the technical school, the Foundation's first project, would be built. The architect, a talented young man from Guadalajara, showed me the final plans. "It will have capacity for 200 students," he explained enthusiastically. "Computer labs, mechanics workshops, spaces to teach traditional crafts. It will be a bridge between the old and the new, as it should be. I nodded, thinking about my own life, always divided between two worlds, two cultures, two ways of understanding reality. A week after my arrival, while having breakfast with Rosario, I received a call from Gabriel. "Dad, I have news." His voice sounded tense. "Richard had an accident." The air froze in my lungs. What kind of accident? Is he okay? Yes, he's out of danger. It was last night. He had been drinking, though he swore it was only 2 beers. He lost control of the car on the highway and ran off the road. Is he in the hospital? Yes, but they'll discharge him today. He has some cuts, a dislocated shoulder, and a fractured rib. The car is totaled. Was he driving your car? I asked, knowing Richard no longer had his own vehicle. No, he was driving yours. I'm sorry, Dad. I gave him the keys because he needed to go to a job interview. I didn't think that. The car doesn't matter, I interrupted him. Is he really okay? Are the doctors sure? Yes. Physically, he'll be fine in a few weeks. Mentally, that's another story. After hanging up, I stared at my coffee, now cold. Rosario, who had overheard the conversation, placed her wrinkled hand over mine. You should go back, she simply said. I just got here. Your son needs you. He's a grown man, Rosario. He has to take responsibility for his actions. My sister looked at me with those eyes that seemed to see through all my defenses. What if he can't do it alone? What if he's so lost that he needs your hand to find his way back, like I needed Dad when I left? She smiled sadly. Dad couldn't follow you, because he had 7 more mouths to feed. But you can go for your son. You have that freedom Dad never had. That afternoon, sitting in the town square under the shade of an old laurel tree, I called Richard. His voice sounded weak, ashamed. I'm so sorry, Dad. The car? I'll pay for it. I swear. To hell with the car, Richard. How are you? There was a long silence. When he spoke again, his voice was broken. I don't know, Dad. I'm scared. I think I hit rock bottom. In the hospital, they ran tests, and my liver isn't well. The doctor says if I keep going like this. He didn't finish the sentence. It wasn't necessary. Where are you now? At your house. Gabriel brought me from the hospital. I made a decision right then, as clear as the blue sky above my head. Listen to me carefully, Richard. I'm coming back. I'll arrive the day after tomorrow, but I want you to understand something. This is your last chance. There won't be any more? I know, Dad, he replied with a humility I had never heard in his voice before. I know. That night, as I packed to return to Chicago earlier than planned, Rosario came into my room with a small, carved wooden box. This was Dad's, she said, handing it to me. I kept it for you all these years. I opened the box carefully. Inside was an antique brass pocket watch, with a chain worn from use. It had belonged to my grandfather and his father before him. Dad always said it should be yours, Rosario continued, because you were the one who had the courage to cross borders, to seek something better for all of us. I held the watch in my hand, feeling its weight, its history, the connection to generations who lived and died on this land. Give it to Richard, Rosario said, not because he deserves it now, but to remind him where he comes from, whose blood runs through his veins, what it really means to be a Martinez. On the flight back to Chicago, as I watched the clouds from the plane window, I thought of all the times I had crossed this border. The first time, hidden in the trunk of a car, scared to death. Then, on endless buses from Tijuana. Later, with my work visa. And finally, with my green card, as a free man. Borders. My whole life had been about crossing them, overcoming them, breaking them when necessary. Physical borders, legal borders, cultural borders. And now I face the most difficult of all, the invisible but powerful border that separated a father and a son who had lost the ability to respect each other, to understand each other, to truly see each other. The plane began its descent toward Chicago. I felt the weight of the old family watch in my pocket. My father never got to cross the border to see me, to meet his grandchildren, to understand the life I built away from him. He died in San Miguel, in the same house where he was born, having never left Jalisco. I was luckier, or perhaps just more determined. I crossed all the borders that life put in my way, and now it was my turn to cross one more, the border of wounded pride, of betrayed trust. For my son, for Richard, for that boy who once held my hand while I taught him to fish, and who now, turned into a broken man, needed that hand more than ever. The plane touched down in Chicago. I was ready for the reunion, for the forgiveness, for the difficult road ahead, because if I had learned anything in my 68 years, it was that second chances are not granted, they are earned, and that respect, like bridges, must be built from both sides. My son reported me to immigration without knowing I had a green card, and so I decided to be the father he needed, not the one he deserved. Because sometimes, true love consists precisely in that, in giving what the other needs, even when they don't deserve it, especially when they don't deserve it. Gabriel was waiting for me at the airport. Seeing him in the crowd, with his well-ironed shirt and that responsible air that always characterized him, I felt a lump in my throat. He was always the sensible one, the peacemaker, the one who bore the consequences of Richard's impulsive actions, and my own. "How is he?" was the first thing I asked as we walked toward the parking lot. "Physically, better. His shoulder hurts, but the cuts are healing." Gabriel paused. "Mentally, he's different, Dad. I've never seen him like this." "Different how?" "Humble, quiet, as if he finally understands the damage he has caused." In the car, Gabriel told me more details about the accident. Richard had gone to a job interview at a small real estate firm. It went well, but instead of going home, he went to a bar to celebrate. He drank more than he admitted. On the highway, a truck changed lanes without signaling, and Richard, with diminished reflexes, swerved sharply. He lost control and went off into the ditch. The first police officer who arrived said he was lucky. Gabriel continued, "If he had swerved the other way, he would have crashed head-on with a tanker truck." Death, that old acquaintance who had circled me so many times in the desert, in the dangerous factories where I worked, on the tough streets where I lived, had just grazed my son. "Has he spoken to Stephanie?" I asked. "Yes, she came to the hospital when she found out. She brought the kids. It was intense. Richard cried when he saw them. That surprised me. Richard had always been like me, proud, unable to show vulnerability, especially in front of his children." "And her? What did she say?" Gabriel sighed. "She's worried about him, that the kids miss him, but she also made it clear that she won't return until he proves real change, not just promises, but actions." "She's fair," I nodded. "Like you," Gabriel said with a small smile. "Sometimes I forget how much you look like Stephanie in that sense. You both see right through Richard's sweet talk." When we arrived at my house, I felt a strange apprehension, as if I were entering an unfamiliar place, even though I had lived there for decades. Richard was in the kitchen, trying to prepare something with only one hand, the other arm in a sling. "Let me help you," I said from the doorway. He turned, startled. His face showed the effects of the accident. A cut almost healed on his cheek, a yellowish bruise near his left eye. But what struck me most was his expression. The usual arrogance had disappeared, replaced by something I couldn't immediately identify. "Dad," he simply said, "I didn't expect you so soon. Your brother told me about the accident." Richard lowered his gaze. "I'm sorry? Your car?" "We already talked about that. The car doesn't matter." I approached the stove. What are you cooking? I wanted to prepare something for when you arrived, like Mom used to do when you came home late from work. The mention of Evelyn took me by surprise. Richard hadn't spoken about her in years, as if he wanted to erase everything that didn't fit with his image as a successful executive. Ranch-style eggs, I observed, looking at the ingredients. Her specialty. They were your favorite. We remained silent for a moment, the awkwardness floating between us like mist. Finally, Gabriel broke the tension. I'll leave you to talk. Elena is waiting for me with the kids. Dad, call me if you need anything. When Gabriel left, Richard and I sat at the kitchen table, 2 steaming cups of coffee between us. The clock on the wall marked every second with a tick-tock that sounded extraordinarily loud in the silence. Richard, I began, we need to talk about what happens now. He nodded without lifting his gaze from his cup. I know. I took my father's watch from my pocket and placed it on the table. Richard looked at it curiously. It was your grandfather's, I explained, and his father's before him. My sister Rosario saved it all these years. Richard took the watch carefully, examining it as if it were an extraterrestrial object. I never met Grandpa, he murmured. He died without meeting you too, without meeting any of his grandchildren. I paused. That has been one of my greatest regrets, that my father died without seeing everything I built, without meeting the family I separated myself from him for. Richard opened the watch. The mechanism, surprisingly, still worked. Time kept running, implacable, within that small metal circle. I want you to have it, I said. His eyes met mine for the first time, full of surprise. Why? After everything I've done? Precisely because of that. For it to remind you where you come from. What blood runs through your veins. The Martinez family has been many things over generations. Farmers, merchants, immigrants. But we have never been cowards. We have always faced our mistakes and paid our debts. Richard closed the watch and clenched it in his hand. I saw him fighting to contain his emotions. I don't deserve it, Dad. No, you don't deserve it. Not yet. But someday, if you work hard to change, to rebuild what you've destroyed, perhaps then you will deserve it. We fell silent again. This time it was a different silence, lighter, as if something heavy had dissolved between us. I've been thinking a lot, he finally said. In the hospital, when they did the tests and told me about my liver, I realized I'm heading down the same path as Uncle Robert. Robert, my younger brother, had died of cirrhosis at 52. A slow, painful death that marked the entire family. And then, Richard continued, when Stephanie brought the kids, and I saw the way Miguel looked at me, with that mix of fear and worry. His voice cracked. I saw myself, Dad. I saw the man I've become, and I didn't like what I saw. I reached my hand across the table, and for the first time in years, my elder son took it, just like when he was a boy and we crossed the streets of Chicago together. The first step is the hardest, I said, recognizing that you're on the wrong path. The second step is changing direction. And what's the third step? He asked, with a flicker of the curiosity he had as a child. Walking, one day after another, building something new on the ruins of the old. In the following days, we established a routine. Richard stayed at my house while he physically recovered. I supervised the foundation's progress in Mexico from here, with daily video calls to the architect and administrators. In the afternoons, Richard went to his therapy sessions and his Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. Sometimes we talked for hours, recalling the past, unearthing old hurts, misunderstandings, unfulfilled expectations. Other times we just watched television in silence, comfortable in each other's presence. Stephanie called every day, so Richard could talk to the children. At first, the conversations were brief, awkward. Over time, they became more natural, warmer. A month after the accident, she agreed to bring the children over for dinner at my house. It was the first time I had seen Richard truly nervous, like a teenager before his first date. We cooked together that night. We made Evelyn's ranch-style eggs, following her recipe to the letter. When the doorbell rang, Richard froze in the kitchen. "I can't, Dad," he murmured. "What if the kids don't like me anymore? What if Stephanie sees I haven't changed enough?" I put my hands on his shoulders, feeling how fragile he had become, how vulnerable. "Look at me, Richard. You're a Martinez. We've survived worse things than this. Go and open the door to your family." That dinner was the beginning of reconciliation. It wasn't perfect or easy. There were awkward silences, cautious glances, but also laughter, especially from the children, who seemed relieved to see their father sober, present, striving to be better. As I watched them interact, I thought about all the times I myself had been absent when my children were young, working double shifts, seeking opportunities, building a future that, without realizing it, was pulling me away from their present. 2 months after the accident, Richard found a job at the real estate firm that had interviewed him before, a lower position than his previous one, with fewer responsibilities and a lower salary, but a start. Stephanie agreed to try couples therapy. She didn't move back home immediately, but she let the children spend weekends with Richard at my house. One afternoon, while tidying the backyard, Richard asked me something he had clearly been wanting to ask for a long time. "Dad, why did you never tell us about your green card? Why did you keep it a secret all these years?" I sat on the old wooden bench, wiping the sweat from my brow. It was a good question. I suppose for the same reason I kept so many secrets in my life. Fear. When you live decades feeling like you don't belong, that they could kick you out at any moment, you develop habits that are hard to break. Holding back information becomes a reflex, a form of protection. Richard sat beside me, thoughtful. "You know what's ironic? If you had told me about the green card, none of this would have happened." "And you wouldn't have hit rock bottom," I replied. "You wouldn't have had to face your demons. You wouldn't be here now, rebuilding your life." He reflected on my words. "So, in a way, my betrayal and your secret brought us here, to this moment." I looked around. The garden I had cultivated for years, the trees I planted when I bought the house, the rose bushes Evelyn loved, and that still bloomed every spring as if she were still here to care for them. Life has strange ways of taking us where we need to be, son. Sometimes the most painful paths are the most necessary. Just then, Richard's phone rang. It was Stephanie. After talking for a few minutes, he hung up with an expression I couldn't interpret. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yes," he replied, a small smile forming on his face. "Stephanie says we can try again. She wants me back home next month if I keep staying sober and in therapy." I felt a mixture of joy and surprisingly a touch of melancholy. My son would return to his family where he belonged, and I would be alone again in this house full of memories. As if reading my thoughts, Richard added, "But I told her I have to talk to you first. I want you to come with us, Dad. At least for a while. The house has an annex we can convert for you. The kids adore you. And I still have a lot to learn from you." I was speechless. After everything that had happened, after the betrayal, the tears, the pain, and the slow, difficult reconciliation, my son was offering me a place in his rebuilt home. "Think about it," he said, returning to his yard work. "You don't have to decide now." That night, while Richard slept, I took out the old letters I had kept for decades. Letters from Evelyn when we were apart. Letters from my parents, written by my sister Rosario, as they never learned to write. Letters from friends left behind, of dreams fulfilled and others lost along the way. Among them, I found one my father sent me shortly before he died. In his simple Spanish, written by Rosario but clearly dictated by him, it said, "Hijo, I never understood why you went so far away. But now, seeing all you have built, All you have achieved, I understand that you had to follow your own path. Respect is earned with actions, not with words, and you have earned mine." Tears blurred my vision. I never knew my father felt that way. I never imagined that, despite the distance, despite my long absences, he had come to respect my decisions, my path. I thought of Richard on his long and difficult journey back from the abyss he had dug for himself, in how, day by day, action after action, he was rebuilding what he had destroyed, earning back the respect of his family, of himself, and yes, mine too. And I thought of myself on the long journey from San Miguel to Chicago, on all the borders I had crossed, not just geographical, but emotional, on how, at 68, I was still learning, still growing, still finding new ways to love and forgive. My son reported me to immigration without knowing I had a green card. And then I learned that second chances are a gift we give ourselves as much as to others. That respect, once lost, can be recovered with effort, honesty, and time. And that sometimes the longest and hardest road is exactly the one we need to travel to get home. The next morning, when Richard woke up for his therapy, he found a note written in my irregular handwriting on the kitchen table. The answer is yes. We'll go to your house together, with your family. It's time for all of us to go home. Next to the note was my father's old watch. Inside, a photograph I hadn't seen before. My father and me, when I was 5, sitting on the porch of our house in San Miguel. He was looking at me with pride. I was smiling at the camera, missing my baby teeth. Rosario must have put it there before giving it to me. A silent reminder that, in the end, we are what we learn, what we teach, and what we forgive. A perfect circle, like the time in that old watch that keeps advancing, without hurry but without pause, through generations.